Priya is fully bilingual in an Indian language, Tamil, as well as English. And in the home, Atana is growing up with some bilingual input, but mostly Tamil. Why did you and Karthik choose to speak mostly exclusively Tamil at home?
The primary reason was, she's going to get English anyway once she starts daycare or once she goes to preschool, whatever it is. And so Tamil is the only way she can get Tamil is from our input. That's one. And the second more pragmatic reason is because we both know Tamil and that's our first language, that's going to be the easiest mode for communication for us. And we think, it's going to be hard if we have to translate everything that we talk to each other to her. So it's easier for her to get inputs from that and know what we're talking. Right. So we're not going to be able to talk 100% in English at home.
Right.
So we just chose, and she can also interact with her grandmom and my grandmoms, and so it's just a way of being able to connect with our tradition back in India.
Priya and her husband Karthik have chosen to speak primarily Tamil at home to Atana, and that is a wonderful decision in a situation like this when the only possibility for the child to get the heritage language is from the parents. And it's quite clear that once the child starts preschool and gets out there in the larger community, that she will get English as well, and she'll acquire that quite naturally as well from that early kind of input. And it's very challenging in immigrant families to ensure that the child maintains the heritage language. And so this is a quite reasonable decision, particularly since Priya and Karthik are both most comfortable in Tamil. On the other hand, if Priya and Karthik had chosen to speak both English and Tamil to Atana, that would be fine too. There's a lot of research from our lab as well that shows that babies who are exposed to two languages from birth don't get them confused. They acquire language according to pretty much the same rate as a child with one language. And so that's a wonderful approach to language acquisition as well.
Amma, mama. Okay. Amma, na paaditama. Amma will sing that song. Amma inge va va, asai muttam da da, ilayil soru, iyai dura, unnai pondra nallal, ஊரில் யாவர் உள்ளார் என்னால் உனக்கு தொல்லை ஏதும் இங்கே இல்லை.
Good job. Hey.
What is that?
Monkey.
Monkey. Caden's already started language acquisition. He's here with his mother Peggy, his grandmother Rita, and his little sister Kira. Kira's lucky because she gets input from her grandmother in Cantonese, from her mother in primarily English, and from her big brother, who's just labeling everything in the world around him. Rita, Kira's grandmother, is talking to her in Cantonese.
Papa, Papa. Give Papa. 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 This is oh no, Uncle Kupi. Uncle Kupi. Uncle Kupi. Ayo. Hey, Kira. Qua. Bibi qua. You show Nana. Say Nana. Okay.
Everything Rita is doing illustrates the wonder of interacting with a child. She's using infant-directed speech, she's maintaining eye contact, she's doing turn-taking, and she was also giving Kira the opportunity to learn one of her heritage languages. And this is a very common bilingual situation. It's not going to be difficult for Kira to negotiate this. She'll figure out who you speak which language to and when.
Papa. 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 Oh no, too busy.
Parents are always really concerned that if they allow their child to be exposed to two languages, even naturally, in the home, that it will cause a language delay. And the research is so clear that the incidence of language delay is exactly the same in children raised in bilingual homes as it is in children raised in homes with just a single language. So yes, there's language delay, but it's equally common for a bilingual child as it is for a monolingual child. The difference, of course, is that for a child who's growing up bilingual, if there's a language delay, everybody and their brother thinks that it's because of the two languages, but it isn't.
Soon after her birth, we talked a lot in Tamil. So me, my mom, and Atana, and the three of us. And so she heard a lot of Tamil around her. But then she went to daycare, so there she got more and more of English and less of Tamil. And at home, I mean, both my husband and I, we speak both Tamil and English at home. My parents speak mostly Tamil with her. But again, when she responds in English, it's very hard for them to maintain Tamil, like continue to speak in Tamil. I think what kinds of language exposure she gets is somehow determined mostly in some sense by her. Even though we want to control that environment, it's largely determined by what she's responding, how she's responding.
அப்படியா போடுவ இப்படி திருப்பி போடு. Yeah. போடு. Good. Yeah, yay!
When Atana was playing with her granddad, you saw that she was talking more in Tamil because she knows that both grandma and grandpa are comfortable in that language, and she talks to them a lot more in Tamil than to us. And she knows that mom and dad, even though we speak Tamil to each other, we can speak English to her. And though grandma and grandpa can also speak English, she somehow associates them more with Tamil, and she speaks to them more in that language. Whereas with us, she switches to English even if we speak to her in Tamil sometimes. So it's a mix. And to be honest, I'm more comfortable in English than in speaking Tamil. So she somehow picks up on that, even though it's not conscious. And even between mom and me, she speaks more in Tamil to her mom than to me. So this is but she's comfortable switching between both the languages. And certain words she knows the equivalent in both languages. So for water, for example, she says tita in Tamil, and then in English she asks for water when she goes to a daycare. So yeah, it's she manages to somehow switch between the languages, and we don't notice it often.
Hey, where's the beta? Uma's 2 now, and she probably started speaking around 12 months were her first words, just your typical stuff. Mama, she calls him Baba, which is Bengali for dad. And baby and bear, those were her first 4 words, I think. Kevin's originally well, his parents are German, my parents are Bengali, so they're Indian. But we mainly speak English to her, but we try to kind of give her a little bit of German and a little bit of Bengali, so she knows a lot of words in both languages, but she can't speak full sentences or anything.
Und der Hund bellt. Der Hund bellt.
Wo ist der Hund? Zeig uns mal den Hund. My parents, they speak a lot of German to Uma. She does hear it a lot. I speak less so, or it's a mix, but I think it's just that we're thinking mostly in English, so we tend to use English more. Most of her books are in English, but I'm often surprised when she might say a word in German or say a few things in German, and it comes out of nowhere. So it is in there somewhere, and she's picked it up along the way.
Hoppa Reiter?
Ja.
Mach los. Hoppa, hoppa Reiter. Wenn er fällt, dann schreit er. Fällt er in den. We use both languages, and we found now when we speak only German to her, she looks in awe at me. So of course I translate because I want her to understand what I'm saying, but she's very quick in catching on. So we try to pass the German on as well as we can, but it's sometimes difficult. And even the two of us, we speak English quite often, so it's a mixture. Jetzt geht er heim zu seinem Haus. Der will den Fisch zeigen, der Mami und dem Papi und seiner Omi und Opa. Eine lange Angel, a fishing rod.
What we know about young children and learning different languages is that even before, well before they're producing their first words, they're already able to distinguish between the speech melodies of different language types. So before Uma was even producing her first words, she would have been able to tell apart English from German, from Bengali, just by the speech melody or the rhythm that is used in those different languages. So that sort of language development begins very early, and it sort of highlights the benefit of speaking to your child in different languages right from birth or even prior to birth, because you're developing different parts of the brain that they're using to tease apart those different languages from a very young age.
Probably one of her very first words was plumps. There's a sort of a rhyming song, and that's the end where you kind of pretend to drop her off your knees, and so this is falling off something is plumps, and now she uses it with her own animals, like with her teddy bear. If he falls down, it's now plumps.
There's a red rooster. I think she's never going to be bilingual in these languages, but I think it's really good for her to have just some different exposure to different languages, and then later on when she grows up, I'm sure she'll be able to pick it up a lot easier because she's got it in her. She's heard it before, so she has that kind of ability, I think, to know what's German, what's Bengali, and if she ever wants to go to India, I think it'll be easier for her to pick up those languages, later on. I don't know. It seems to me like it's a good idea for her to have that basis of just having different languages spoken to her, even if it's never gonna make her into a, like a native speaker. Bangla, okay. What's this in Bangla? Good, fool. What about in German?
If you're observing a child at a certain age, you might think, well, they're not quite caught up to their peers in their language development. And that sometimes happens with multilingual children, but what we have to remember is they're balancing, two or maybe more language systems at one time. They're learning words in all those different language systems. And that requires a lot of intellectual capacity, memory, and so on. So we want to take a look at, what are they doing in each language to get a full picture of their language development.
When we do point out things to her and say, can you say this in Bengali, she'll know to say the word that we've taught her in Bengali, and then when we say it in German, she can say it. So she already knows that she's working with 3 different languages, even though we don't really differentiate them. But then when we point them out, she knows that she's saying something in a different language.
She also differentiates between the people too, so she may, when she sees Tisha's parents, I think she's already associated certain words with them, and when she sees my parents, she's associated certain words or language with them, so she's able to make sort of a distinction between the different words or the different languages to a certain extent.
From 18 months to now has just been unbelievable, really. Like the last 6 months with her language development. I mean, she went from saying, just one word, and now she says full sentences and sings songs, and it's amazing.
Alle meine Entchen schwimmen auf dem See.
The research on baby sign is really interesting as well. It is the fad right now for parents to use baby sign, and it's great. It makes parents feel like they're communicating with their child, and sometimes they can communicate more effectively. If a child isn't able to communicate and can learn a sign, and they can learn signs a few weeks earlier than they can words, you know, that's great. It's wonderful, I think, for the parent-child relationship and everything. But there's no evidence whatsoever that learning baby sign accelerates language acquisition. And if anything, it doesn't. And it's not a real language. Sign language is a real language. So if you have a parent who is a fluent signer or a deaf parent who signs as a natural language, then their child will pick up sign language as a language. But if you know 30 words in Spanish, and you teach those words to your child, that doesn't make your child a Spanish speaker. And similarly, if you know 30 baby signs, you know, your child might learn those signs, but that doesn't make them a sign language speaker. So I have no problem with baby sign. In fact, I think it's great because it makes parents feel good about themselves, and they are doing something, and it shows that they care about their child. It's not necessary for language acquisition, and it's probably not going to make a difference one way or the other in terms of language acquisition, but it might make a difference in terms of the relationship between the parent and child. And that's most important for all aspects of learning, language and every other kind of learning.
What's important is you want to be comfortable in your interaction with your child. If you're a dominant English speaker, you're probably going to use English and feel most comfortable communicating in English with your child. And that's really important for the child, that you have natural communication. It's going to enable that communication to happen more often and help her or the baby's language development that way.
One of the interesting facets about bilingual exposure is that it's the opposite. It isn't the case that children who are learning two languages are going to have a delay. Rather, it seems that there are a lot of advantages to growing up with two languages from birth. So the kinds of advantages that have been shown are ones that would be specific to a bilingual environment. So if you're growing up with two languages, you might have to shift your attention from one language to the other. And there's research that shows that babies who are growing up with two languages might be better able to change their attention, to learn one set of rules or regularities and then switch to another one at a little bit younger age. We have some data that indicates that they pay attention to cues in language, whether it's in the heard language or that which they see in the faces of people talking, that will help them keep languages apart more than monolingual babies do.
Some of the research on multilingualism suggests that children who are learning more than one language actually develop different brain structures. And they may have benefits. Once they get to around school age, we can see benefits in working memory, their ability to do complex tasks, their social and interaction skills with different people. And later, much later in life, there's research that suggests that people who speak more than one language actually have a later onset for degenerative brain diseases, things like Alzheimer's and so on. So these are not all well understood, but it seems like the mental powers that you're using to learn more than one language system, I mean, these are really complex systems, and when we learn two or maybe three, we're using a lot of mental resources. We're using a lot of different parts of our brain, perhaps, and that has benefits for general cognitive tasks.
On the other hand, I don't want the message to be that everybody should try now to introduce a second language in the home if they're from a home where they both speak the same language. What we haven't shown, but I'm confident is there as well, is that there is another set of advantages for growing up with only a single language.
Socks are ready. Yeah.
Mommy.
And so ultimately, it isn't the case that bilingualism is better than monolingualism. What it is that babies are prepared to learn about the world that they grow up in. And if they grow up in a world with a single language, they're going to learn about that language and the careful rules, you know, the precise rules for how that language is used. And if they grow up in a world with two languages, they're going to be able to keep those two languages apart and acquire each of those languages.
Children who are unilingual are able to focus all their cognitive resources on a single language. That doesn't necessarily translate into a long-term advantage, but it's certainly no disadvantage. The most important thing is that a child is communicating with its parents, its caregivers in a language that they're comfortable in. That's going to give them the tools to acquire and develop their language ability and become, you know, competent adults down the road.
Mm-hmm. Mommy?
Thank you. You're so good at sharing. Thank you.
Yum.
Yum. You can have that bite. So good, isn't it? Would you live off of toast if you could?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mommy?
Thanks. Another bite? You can have that one, that's okay.
A baby growing up with one language has the same vocabulary on average as a baby growing up with two languages. But a baby growing up with one language, say James is 20 months old and he knows 100 words, if he were growing up with two languages, he might also know 100 words, but there would be 50 or in each language. So the vocabulary size, given the same amount of sort of proclivity for language acquisition, the vocabulary size for a monolingual learning baby in any single language at the same age is going to be larger than it is for a bilingual baby. That doesn't necessarily maintain across a lifespan. So if you're a child whose parents read to them a lot and who becomes a reader himself or herself, bilingualism can ultimately lead to a big vocabulary in each language. But if you're a child who grows up in a bilingual home where there isn't a rich kind of linguistic input and you don't become a reader or more focused on those kinds of activities yourself, there will always be a smaller vocabulary in each language. And it's not necessarily an advantage or disadvantage. It's just that children are born ready to adapt to the language environments that they grow up in.
Oh my goodness, she knows yes too.